muted from Periscope.
Thank you, sir. Did you change the name of our Google? Oh, no, just kidding.
Nope.
It'll forever be August 29th.
Whatever.
I like it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Okay, we are good on
YouTube.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Tunnel Vision, a show brought to you by USCFootball.com. The gang, the OG gang, is back. I'm your host, Keely. You're joined by Ryan Abraham and Shotgun Spratling. We have a fun show for you guys today. If you look at the topics, you might be surprised by that third bullet point, but we'll get to it. We're going to talk about us meeting USC.
I typed that in there myself.
I know, it's shocking.
I just saw that.
Pigs are flying. It's ridiculous.
You have 1 minute.
It's
This is counting as part of it.
No, it has a bullet point, Ryan. It deserves more than 1 minute. We're going to talk about meeting USC's new coaches. Us, the media, are going to do that on Tuesday, a week before USC actually kicks off its spring camp. And speaking of spring camp, we're going to be talking about spring football, what we're expecting on March 10th, and the 5 weeks that come after that. And like we've alluded to, USC basketball. We're going to be talking about that. Shotgun looks pretty intrigued. Shotgun, you'll be able to pick up the baton on that one. Like always, you can call us 512-4TUNNEL. If you have comments, questions, concerns, make sure you call us. You can also tweet at us, #TunnelVision. I'll put your tweet up on the screen. And y'all know the deal. Wherever you're watching, YouTube, Periscope, Facebook Live, put your comments, questions, and concerns. We'll do our best to answer them, like I said. But guys, where do you want to start? It's kind of interesting. We got word last week that USC is kind of getting ahead of themselves. They're going to sit down. We're going to have a sit down with all the coaches, the new coaches, kind of in a marathon style, one by one, each coach. We're going to talk to them starting on Tuesday morning. What are you expecting for that, Ryan?
Yeah, that's something new, which I like. I think that's cool. That we thought that we could maybe talk to like Todd Orlando, the new defensive coordinator, at the signing day press conference, but there wasn't a signing day press conference. So we didn't get to do that. And what I think, if you look at the new athletic department, the new administration, they actually listen to what people are saying. If there's criticism that's thrown at them or some of their decisions, it doesn't just get, filed away where, Pat Hayden, Lynn Swan, they didn't care what anyone said. They heard the fans talk about the UC Davis game, and they found a way to get out of that game. For this one, they heard the media say, hey, they always have a press conference on Pac-12, on signing day. I know you only signed one guy, but there was opportunities to meet like Todd Orlando. And I think
some good press.
Yeah, there was opportunity for good press there, and they skipped it. So I think this was, I don't know for sure, but this is my thought. This was a result of that. And they're like, you know what, why don't we just have the media come in all at once and meet all the new coaches? Then you don't have to meet them for the first time at the first spring practice or whatever it is. So I like the idea. And then we also get to talk to Graham Harrell as well. So they want to put their like kind of shining star out there, the guy that, was named for a bunch of different jobs in the offseason. But I like the move.
Yeah, I thought they did this last year with Graham Harrell, making him available before the spring started. I thought that was a good idea. Same thing here. It's kind of like the reverse ESPN car wash, because usually you have one person, a coach or a player that goes from each show, jumps around. This is just going to have all the media in one, but it's going to be each coach coming and jumping around. So it's kind of the reverse car wash there. But we'll get a chance to kind of interact with them and hear what they have to say going into the spring. The biggest thing is going to be what are they looking for in the spring for me? What are they trying to get out of it? Spring football is not my favorite time of the year.
No?
I'm not a spring football fan.
Okay.
Same with fall baseball or summer basketball or just like all the showcase events that they have for high school athletes. I want games. I want things that actually matter and mean something. And spring football, yes, it's good to see some battles as far as depth chart, but does it really mean anything? No. Once you get to fall camp, then it actually means something because we've seen – how many times have we seen some spring showcase stars?
Like a Dylan Baxter or
There's always a spring.
Or
Jamel Cook.
Devon Flournoy.
Florida was good. Who was the 5-star? Markeith Ambles I think he was one. Maybe
Was he good? I don't remember.
If
him
I remember
being
that, who was-
terrific.
Yeah,
The wide receiver that was from Modern Day that I'm blanking on. That later
Victor
had-
Blackwell.
Victor Blackwell had
Yeah.
I think 3 touchdowns in a spring game or
Yeah.
something like that. Had a monster game. Never.
Well, they got rid of the spring games anyway, so you don't have to worry about that.
I understand, but I'm saying like that we've seen guys that have shown out in the spring, and then you have to look and see who are they going against, because a lot of times that's where guys will shine, is that you're getting a chance to go against some walk-ons, you're getting some 3rd or 4th string guys because of injuries, and that's kind of the big thing you kind of look for early in the spring is, okay, who's not really doing much, may have had some minor off-season surgeries.
Yeah.
Last year there were some significant ones with the shoulders and stuff, Elijah Griffin being out and guys like that. We didn't really know a bunch about going into the spring, but then started getting the details afterwards. That'll be something interesting. But so I'm curious what those coaches are looking to get. Some of them will have full rooms. The defensive line group is pretty intact. You know what you're going to get out of that group. But the DBs, a lot of competition is still there.
Sure.
Even though there are some guys that are kind of a step above, still a lot of competition in that group. So I'm curious to see what those coaches are looking for. And, when we talk to Todd Orlando about scheme-wise, how many differences and stuff are going to be there as well.
Yeah, I like that. It's just giving each coach their due. I think sometimes when you have this much turnover and try to get it all in one practice, it's just people going from scrum to scrum, and it's kind of a madhouse. This time we get them in a classroom setting, kind of a presser setting where they can have enough time to answer questions. So to give you an idea of the schedule, we're first going to be able to talk to Todd Orlando, then Craig Niver, then Dante Williams, Vic Soto-Oto, and then Graham Harrell, and then John David Baker, and then Sean Snyder, the new special teams coordinator. So we're getting a full, basically, we get some returners, but a full new cast that we'll be able to talk to. Any lingering questions that are on the top of your mind that you're going to ask a specific coach, guys?
I kind of want to get, I like the Sean Snyder stuff, the special teams, some of his philosophies and how that will incorporate with what USC was already doing. They had much better special team schemes than what USC has had, and kind of get his thoughts on that if he's watched any of the tape. Maybe if he ever trotted out 2 players with the same number before on like a kickoff return. Sorry,
always got to get that snark.
but that's a good one. I mean, like Shotgun mentioned with Todd Orlando and some of the scheme stuff. Dante Williams is obviously, he was a hot commodity. Maybe talk to him about the process of how he was hired and how difficult of a decision it was to leave Oregon. I think Georgia was after him as well. So there's a bunch of questions out there for all these guys. So I'm really glad they're going to be made available, and we'll all get to a chance to meet them.
Yeah, I want to hear from Dante Williams and Craig Nivar, the distribution of responsibilities there with the DBs. Is it going to be strictly safeties versus cornerbacks? Where does the nickelback go? Who takes care of that? Do they plan to have nickelback? Do you plan to have dime backs? Those type of things. You're going to have some of that stuff schematically occasionally versus depending on what team you're playing, but is that expected to be a regular part of the defense? Those type things are kind of the overarching interesting things to start with. Interesting with the 2 numbers on the field. Now there's, it's been suggested in the new rules, they have to be put through completely, but the number 0 is now available.
Oh,
that one's going to be very interesting. That it can potentially be available, and I hope it's all 350-pound defensive tackles that also double as fullbacks, like McMillan, if you remember, I think it was
From
at Cal.
Yeah,
that wore I think 99. He needs to be in the number 0.
That would have been good.
Brandon Peely, use him as a fullback.
Yeah, Brandon Peely would look great in the number 0. But one of the other things was that you can only have 2 of the same number on a roster now. So occasionally there would be, if you have a couple of walk-on punters, they would all be 49.
Yeah.
And they're never getting into the game or whatever, but it was just to simplify things a little bit. So, hopefully that means that USC figures their stuff out a little bit even better.
Simplifying things should help USC because they seem to make things complicated in a lot of ways.
Oh, sassy Ryan tonight is interesting.
Sassy.
We
We haven't
never
had a
know
show.
which Ryan we're gonna get sometimes.
What's it been, like a week and a half since we did a show?
It's been a while. It's been a while since Mr. Gunn has been on. Tunnel
Yeah,
Vision.
we've done like 2 shows without him. Those were like our highest rated shows ever, which I don't know if that's
well,
saying.
I mean, I think
I'm just kidding. I don't know.
Shotgun, how's your life been? You've been everywhere and back, basketball, baseball. We'll get into that. We'll talk about USC baseball too. Ryan doesn't want to, but we'll talk about it.
We will not.
We will. I run the show.
Yeah, the month of January is kind of a down month for me because there's only one sport going on, and that's basketball, and it doesn't take the same precedence that football does. We're not going to practice 3 times a week and then having a game and having a high school game the day before. But I did get a chance to get out and see some of USC's targets and commits for the next couple years for basketball as well.
Okay.
So got to see some high action stuff there. Baseball season has started. I've been all over the place the last few weeks, traveling, seeing, because I cover the entire West Coast for a different site. So I've been seeing a ton of teams. I think in the first 10 days, I saw 16 games.
Wow.
First 10 days of the season. So, and I have seen USC a couple times, so got a chance to check them out as well. They've looked good so far. So, it's been a
7-3 or something. Is that right? Or
I believe that's their record currently. They won again today.
then maybe it's 8-3. I don't know. Maybe I saw that earlier, or
win.
maybe 7-3. I don't know.
To win the series, but yeah, this actually becomes once baseball season starts and once football spring camp starts, it's actually the most ridiculous time of the year for me. So it goes from the light month of January to once it starts spring camp, because then there's technically 3 sports going at once.
Oh.
True. And gentlemen, you didn't plan this today, but a lot of people are taking offense of the colors you two are wearing. And a smart viewer pointed out USC's playing UCLA in basketball on Saturday, and you look very blue today.
Oh. I got a new shirt. No sponsor. The Untuck It things. You see a lot of like sponsor. Maybe if Untuck It wants to sponsor us, but I got it for Christmas, and I was like, I actually had it a part of the closet. I didn't realize it. I'm like, oh, I forgot about this shirt, so I put it on. So sorry, it wasn't about any kind of colors or anything.
This is my attempt to be a neutral color, because I went and saw Long Beach State versus Mississippi State, battle of top 25 teams this morning, and then I went and saw Cal State Fullerton versus San Francisco. So 4 distinct colors there that, baby blue is about the only one that works as a neutral.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Now, like I said, spring starts not next week, or not this week, next week, March 10th. I'll put the schedule up so you guys can view it. It'll be open both to the media and to fans. And we've seen this kind of arrangement from Clay Helton in the last couple of years. They'll practice the first week and then take a week off for spring break, and then come back and have 3 consecutive weeks. Ryan, I want to get your opinion first on this. What is your takeaway from this type of configurement? I know USC, they have to have that acclimatization period that first week, but what do you make of that, plus the spring showcase? You've already kind of said your thoughts on it, but the spring game.
Well, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of like the taking a week off thing in the middle, because it ends up being a little bit more than a week that you're not around. But they've been doing it for a while now, so whatever. But I'm also not a fan of not having the spring game be the very last practice. I'd like it to just end with the spring game, not showcase, none of that stuff going on.
Yeah.
I did so we had, I don't know if we've had did we have one of these since we had Mike Bone on the podcast? I'm not sure if we did. Or maybe we did. Yeah, we did later that evening.
You're not saying what it is, so I can't confirm.
It was the Peristyle podcast. We had Mike Bone,
yes.
the athletic director, on as a guest, and
Yes.
it made some national headlines and stuff. It was kind of fun. But one of the things he said was, and we asked him about like the spring football and like practices, and the way he said it, it's going to be, we invite everyone to come out. It's going to be open to the fans, open to the media. It sounded like there was definitely some kind of meeting about that. Like, here's what we need to do. We're going to open things up and make sure everyone can come. And because even at the spring showcase that they've had at Cromwell Field the last couple of years, it was just this weird configuration. Like, they let people in, but it just, I don't know, it wasn't very welcoming. Now it sounds like they're going to be a lot more welcoming. So it seemed to me that was another decision that at least the athletic department was a part of in some way, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and if they can get it back in the Coliseum, I think that's another opportunity to showcase what you were trying to, is trying to be the gym of the program. They're doing dinners and stuff there. They're doing recruiting events, in the tower, the scholarship tower. So if you get the chance to give fans that tour that they were not able to do in the fall
Right.
showcase. I think
They were supposed to, but then it wasn't quite finished, right?
It wasn't
So
quite
that-
ready.
yeah.
Hadn't passed all the elevator tests or something. So fans didn't get that opportunity. So I think that's an extra opportunity for USC to kind of showcase their product a little bit, and Mike Bone to be there and talking with people once again. He does really well in those personal interactions with people. Everyone
does.
usually comes away impressed with what he has to say. So I think it's just an extra opportunity there. I'm like you. I would rather it be a true game at the end. Try to bill it and try to sell as many tickets or invite as many people out. Invite as many high school teams as you can out. Whatever. Just get them in the Coliseum. Hey, look at this atmosphere. Look at where you could potentially play. All that type of stuff. I don't like the schedule. I said this to Keely. I went on a rant on it. I think on the Family Feud. I don't know if she kept. I don't know if she kept it in the Family Feud.
I edited it down a little bit, but I kept some of the rant.
I don't like. I don't like the fact that they're starting it next week. I would much rather them start this week. If they're going to take that week off, then the Pac-12 tournament for basketball is open. The media can cover it. You give a little credence to your basketball team. They have an opportunity. I'm not saying they will, but they're talented enough to potentially make a run in the tournament. You're not going to have anyone that's going to be able to cover both football and basketball in that event. So I think you're hurting yourself there. You've talked about a lot about how having open practices and having media there. I think this is something that can take away from your overall your money makers if you're not allowing the media to cover both.
That's true.
And it's
it
hard.
used to be where you would have like a writer for both. The newspaper, like LA Times, is going to have one guy, and you're going to. How do you cover both of them?
Yeah, and it's difficult to kind of balance that, and it's difficult to schedule all those things out because there's so many other events that are going on campus. But if it's your two biggest, highest revenue sports, I think you should try to make it possible there. And you're going to have a Saturday practice along with UCLA basketball game. So how's that going to work out? Is that Or am I getting my timing wrong?
You're getting your timing
Oh,
wrong. But
I'm
it's
a
okay.
little bit off on that one.
Yeah.
But I think that also it doesn't make sense to have the acclimation period and then take a week off. If you're going to take a week off, do it in the middle and say, hey, we got to go hard. We got to go, we got to be going flying through a wall until we get this because we're going to have an extra week to heal up. What are you going to heal up from in the after the acclimation period? Owie, I hit my finger. What is this? I mean, that's how I would kind of champion it to my team is, hey, we got to go really hard, and then you guys are going to get a full week off. If we just go as hard as we can this week, in the first full padded week, and then we're going to take a week off, we'll assess everything, we'll get you guys back in, and the last 2 weeks we can, we work on things and then get ramped back up towards going into that, the stretch and getting that spring showcase, spring game. I just don't like the way that it's acclimation period, week off, and having the week off the way it's scheduled with basketball as well.
Yeah.
How much is the spring showcase, the scheduling of it, dictated by the Pac-12 network and when they can put it up
I mean, I think
or broadcast it?
when they broadcast it,
Yeah.
yeah. I think if USC said we're going to do our spring game whatever day, then the Pac-12 network should go, okay, we'll put that on because that's going to be one that people would watch. So, and if they don't, that's something that USC needs to address because if they've moved their spring game, that's not at the end of their spring practice, and that's what they wanted to do because of the Pac-12 network, which is a terrible business venture, then that's something that's wrong and need to be addressed. So maybe that was decided before Mike Bone came in, but my guess is Mike Bone and his department wouldn't really put up with something like that. So I don't think that's the case, but maybe it was before, and that will change in the future. That's something that we can ask, though. That'll be interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, you're supposed to be the crown jewel of the Pac-12 in football. You should be able to have a little bit more sway about when you actually participate. Have your game if they want to put it on.
Yeah.
Tell them, look, hey, this is what our schedule is going to be. Because what happens when there's rain or something, or you have unfortunately there's weather or something happens like that, they change the schedule, right?
Yeah.
For the most
Well,
part.
what conversation could happen? It's like ring. It's Larry Scott, USC. But you were going to have your spring game on April 13th or whatever it was going to be. Could you move it a week earlier? Because Oregon State would like to do theirs. Really want to show it on the network. It's like no one should ever have that conversation. So now the more I'm thinking about this, Keely, now you're going to make me mad. So we don't want that should not have happened. If that happened, then there should be some heads rolling because that's a terrible decision. If USC moved the spring game for it because other people were going to have their
You're
game there.
getting upset over a hypothetical, though, right?
Right.
We don't fully
Which
know
I'm gonna
this.
maybe I'll send a text right now and find out what's going on. So I'm going to do that
And
while we're broadcasting.
It also could be if it was, especially with the previous regime, it could have been USC just waited that long and they're like, hey, everyone else has already scheduled their games. This is the date that probably works best. And they're like, yeah, okay, whatever, we'll do that.
Yeah, that's the wrong answer too. Like, guess what? They can move. Oregon State can move theirs, or Washington State can move theirs.
No, I'm saying that was the previous ineptitude. Like they wouldn't have scheduled it
Right,
out.
yeah.
It's like, we're gonna have yeah, I guess we can do a spring showcase if you want. Like we hadn't even thought about that. You know, it's
Yeah.
February, it's Valentine's Day, and they're like, oh, wait, a spring showcase. What sport is that for?
We haven't. That's one thing we haven't got more information on because people have asked that we haven't been told specifically if it's going to be at the Coliseum or what the format is. So we'll find out. We do know, like we said, Mike Bone told us that they're going to be open to everybody. So at least we know that.
And speaking of Mike Bone, I'm going to jump back into spring camp in a bit, but he talked to Dennis Dodd. Ryan, you're aware of this. Kind of
Yes.
talking about what we talked about on our podcast. What was your takeaway about? Some people said he was walking back what he said, but I feel like there's dynamics at play here.
There is. So we did the interview with Mike Bone, and I asked him at the end, like, hey, about the Pac-12 and how it's, financial issues, and hey, would going independent or leaving the conference, would those things be on the table? And he said everything's on the table, and it was like, oh, okay, so USC is going to act like USC now, and if the Pac-12 isn't providing the kind of revenue support that they need, and going independent with like Notre Dame and being on NBC does, then they would be open to doing that. He kind of backed off and said there's no plans to. So Dennis Dodd, Mike Dodd's a volleyball player. Dennis Dodd, who's a friend of ours, we like Dennis a lot. Had a kind of controversial story a week earlier when he was giving this glowing praise of Clay Helton, and the fans really killed him. Then he talks to Mike Bone. And it seemed like in the initial part he was backing off a little bit about we're not looking to leave the Pac-12, which I think is true. They're not looking to it, but they want to keep their options open. And he made some other comments later on that was, I think John Wilner did it well. Like John Wilner looked at that and said, Mike Bone has now twice said they could look at doing things to leave the conference, even though it seemed like in the beginning he was saying we're not looking to do that. But his language was we are open to what's going to be best for USC. And I think that's something we just haven't seen before. And the big thing about this is right now USC's house is a mess, and it would be hard to do something like that. This is assuming you can clean it up over the next couple of years and USC gets back to where they're going to be. But looking at the revenue, the way it's distributed, USC's revenue from the last contract to this one's gone up a little bit. For the other, like for the Oregon States and Washington States and Arizona's of the world, it went up significantly and came up to USC. But the problem is, even if you're making the same money in Los Angeles, your UCLA or USC, as Washington State does in Pullman, Washington, $33 million a year or whatever goes way further in Pullman than it does in Los Angeles. So you have USC and UCLA bringing in the majority of the TV revenue, but they're getting a smaller portion of the overall revenue because their cost of doing business is much higher than some of the other things. So it's not a great, and I think Pat Hayden was a part of this, and that should have never agreed to anything like this. I don't think Mike Bone will, but I think he's sort of putting the Pac-12 on notice, like, hey, you can't just push USC around anymore. So I think this is a good thing. Does it mean all the way to leaving the conference or going independent? I think you have to look at those options. Just talking about those options, and we've said this for years, just bringing that up, I think you've stirred the hornet's nest up in in San Francisco, and you've made them aware. And that's what you want to do because USC wants to get the best deal they possibly can. And after all this talk, which we started, so props to us, that's probably a good thing for USC going forward.
Shotgun, any thoughts
Little rant
besides
there?
rolling your eyes?
No, the only thing would be that I caught was you saying stirring the hornet's nest with the Pac-12. Is there really a hornet's nest?
I've been told that people were aware of that, and maybe that's exactly why the Dennis Dodd story came out so quickly. There was some calls made, some favors pulled. Like we put something in the war room about it. Didn't get a lot of details, but that's I think there was a shot over the bow.
It's more like a harmless ant nest colony rather than a hornet's
Ant
nest.
nest.
Like not fire ants, but just
Yeah.
Your
black
regular
ants.
ants.
But USC was overwhelmed by that little friendly ant colony before. Now they're going to stomp on it and maybe like throw a flaming bag of poo on it and go, okay, now what you going to do?
Why that?
I don't know. That's a
analogy?
pretty good one. It's more of a doorstep thing than an anthill thing, but it'll work.
Okay, moving on. Like I mentioned, spring camp talk. Ryan, you wrote an article this week about who is going to replace Austin Jackson at left tackle. That's one of the biggest questions going into this season, into spring camp, USC's offensive line in general. What are you thinking as far as left tackle and how that's going to go?
Yeah, so you can check the story up on USCfootball.com. I think Chris Trevino did an overall offensive line story a month or so earlier talking about that. And Austin Jackson's the only, undergraduate or, non-senior to declare for the NFL draft. He was him and Michael Pittman were the only two Trojans at the combine. I think both helped themselves with what they were able to do at the combine, but there wasn't any obvious answer to who's going to be the next left tackle. I think Frank Martin was listed as the backup last year. We saw him in the spring actually do pretty well. There were so many guys out. He was the starting left tackle last spring showcase, but he's been around the program a long time. He's never seen him do much. He was the number 2 guy. Do you think he moves up and becomes the left tackle? I don't think so. He wasn't going to be in that early, 6-7 man rotation. It looks like Elijah Vera Tucker, who arguably the best offensive lineman, the highest graded from Pro Football Focus, goes from left guard, moves out to left tackle. I think he's athletic enough to do that. I think he's got the size. And then you can move some of the other pieces around, and maybe a Frank Martin backs him up again. You have a Jason Rodriguez, who I think he's changed his body quite a bit. He looks different than when he came in as a freshman, and he redshirted last year, played in 4 games, I think, towards the end of the season. He would be someone else that is in the mix and probably going to get some reps there. So that's one thing you want to watch in the spring is who's playing what position. They might move guys around. My guess is you want your blind side protected for Keaton Slovis, and you probably feel there's no obvious answer, but Elijah Vera Tucker seems to be the best option.
So here's the question, though, for Elijah Vera Tucker. Do you want to move to left tackle?
Yeah, because then you're taking your best lineman and moving him.
No, I'm talking about Elijah Vera Tucker himself, because
yeah.
I think his future is as a guard in the NFL.
That's a good point, too.
I don't think – now, he's going to want to try to show that he can be a tackle, and if he can, that makes his stock rise even more because you have the versatility. In the NFL, you want guys that can be able to play multiple positions, especially if they can play tackle and work their way inside. So that'd be great for him. However, if he gets exposed out there and he's just wasting his time compared to, getting better and better as a guard and becoming one of the top 3 guards in the draft next year, then I think he hurts himself. So I think this is this is what the spring is good for, and this is the interesting part of spring camp is that trial and error.
Yeah.
Okay, let's put him out there, see how things go, see what it looks like. If he's not quick enough, there's edge rushers that are getting by him, and it's physical, not just the technique of being a tackle versus a guard. Then you make the switch back and you see who else can go out there. I've said before, I think Liam Jimmons is probably the guy I would try out there as well. I think he's athletic enough.
He's a big Jimmons fan.
Yeah, I think he's longer, and I think he's got pretty good feet. And just the strides he's made in his game since he moved over the offense line has been tremendous. So I would give him an opportunity out there as well. Hey, if both of them can play it, that's even better.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen? You're going to have linemen go down during the season. It happens every year. You never make it through a season without a lineman getting injured. That it's like it's like a pink unicorn showing up on campus. And you don't have running backs make it through.
Sure.
Your position groups that have the most injuries are those two because you're in the trenches. People roll up on you, so you get ankle injuries, miss a game or two or whatever. Hopefully it's nothing more, but you're going to have people miss. So you need to have not only that starter, but you need to have somebody behind him in case the starter goes down. You don't want to happen to you what happened at Washington State a couple years ago when Toa Lobendon had the staph infection, couldn't travel, and then Austin Jackson gets thrown out there. Well, then you get 2 more injuries in the game.
Chumadoga and
Vianney
Talamavao. Last game he played.
Yeah, went down for the season. So you have 3 guys go down, and suddenly you're throwing all your backups in there. And at that time, USC's backups were probably better. We're closer to the first team than last year's were. Mm-hmm. So are you going to be able to build those guys up? You could probably get to 5 and maybe 6 this year, guys that you're going to trust. But can you build 7, 8, 9, potentially 10 for when you do have an injury to where you can fill someone in rather than having to move somebody and flip somebody over the other side and try to change things up and, make those adjustments on the fly and have to do that in a game. That's much more difficult than saying, our left tackle went in, but we have confidence in the backup that he can step in and take care of that. And then during the week, if we need to make a change, then we'll do it then.
One thing real quick on that, if you want to look, we're not sure how it's going to play out. There's some different options there, like we talked about.
Yeah.
Look at the recruiting class that USC brought in. What kind of bodies are we talking there? Like, this wasn't about 265-pound guys that you were trying to build into offensive linemen. This was more about tall, long, heavy guys that were, 315, 320, whatever, 6'7", that you can put there and kind of get in the way. So maybe that's if Elijah Vera Tucker doesn't want to move out there, or they don't feel comfortable moving him from a position they know he's got locked down, maybe you put one of your bigger bodies out there just because that's the more of the philosophy. The way they were recruiting that position, it seems like that's more the philosophy. You got these big guys there that at least kind of get in the way.
Yeah, and that's something that when you miss out on 2 straight classes, which they did on the offensive line, we've mentioned it several times, but Jackson Carman is starting at Clemson. Penei Sewell starting and is the best left tackle in the country at Oregon. Those were the 2 guys you really wanted 2 years ago. And then the previous class, you missed out on Sean Ryan, who's starting left tackle at UCLA, and you missed out on Jonathan Now, who's up at Oregon as well. Those are your top targets, 2 top targets in each class, and you missed out on all 4 of them. And because of that, that's when you had to reach more. That's when you had to have this is an offensive lineman heavy class. And that's why that's why the ranking's so low. We had to go get linemen. Well, why did you have to go get them? Because you
missed for 2 years in a row.
Yeah, you missed for 2 years in a row. And that's the difference when you come off a class where you have 5 guys and you're really excited about those 5 guys, which is the third year guys or fourth year guys this year with Austin Jackson, Jalen McKenzie, and those guys. That's when you can go get a Liam Douglas and say, okay, we think Liam Douglas is a project, but we think in 3 years he's going to be a guy that can contribute for us, or maybe 4. But he's going to be really good those last couple of years because he just hasn't played football before, but he's really athletic. We like his size. We think we can put more. And that's when you can do that, whereas when you miss out on a couple classes in a row, you got to be like, we got to go get big boys that if we need to, we can throw them in there right now, and at least they're big and can be in the way.
Yeah.
As far as personnel-wise, Tito had a question on YouTube who said, if AVT moves to left tackle, who replaces AVT at left guard? And that also kind of brings in the conversation. At what point do you think about Justin Dedich and his potential at the guard position and maybe moving him over?
I think that's the center is going to be interesting because Dedich seems to, he's doing really well. He's like lifting, he's squatting like Volkswagens in there with Aaron Osmus and stuff. They're doing a lot with him there. So, does he move or does Brett Nealon move? I think you get an Andrew Voorhees back if you assume he's going to be healthy.
Yeah.
Is it a Liam Jimmins that can play one of the guard spots? Jalen McKenzie kicking out to the right tackle. Mm-hmm. So I think it's like those 6 or 7 guys that, like Chaka was talking about, you can kind of move them around a little bit. But I think they're going to try some different options there if you move Elijah Vera Tucker.
And we haven't even mentioned the guy that has played tackle as well as Andrew Voorhees. He has tackle experience as a freshman, so he's another potential guy that can move out there as well. I think, like I said, it's going to be a trial and error period. And also, I think what happens in the spring and how comfortable they feel with some of those guys could determine how heavy they go after a grad transfer, at the tackle position.
Yeah.
And it's a very thin grad transfer class right now. Now, it's possible that something opens up after the spring. Guys feel like you're at Alabama and you feel like you're not going to be the starter, so you go in the portal and you go to USC and that works out for you. But that's a hope and a wish and a dream for USC right now. I mean, the Akron left tackle, Jasper asked about him. Counsel, I can't remember his first name right now, but he asked if he comes to USC, is he good enough to start? I don't know. I mean, if you're grad transferring from Akron and we haven't heard a lot about him, usually not necessarily that much. Usually if there's a grad transfer, there's a tackle that's available, you would hear a lot more about him, even if it was a
Drew Richmond you heard a lot about. He started 20-something games in the SEC, mm-hmm. So,
there were several programs out looking for that because you can always use an extra tackle.
Yeah.
We have a question in regards to the offensive line, pretty general, but it's from our buddy John on Facebook. He says, is this offensive line going to be able to run block and open some holes to establish some type of running threat this season?
Interesting. Yeah, we got to see. I think we saw how good the passing game could be. We never it's just the way things shook. It took a while for the passing game to get going after JT Daniels went down. When you had like all three running backs going down, I think that sort of set the running game back as well. You're going to have a little bit different look, I think, this year. I think they're going to be more comfortable in the system. As long as everyone's not getting hurt again, I think we'll see. I think they're going to try to establish the run a little bit more than what they were doing. Will this offensive line, though, be good enough to kind of punch people in the mouth and run when you know you're going to run? I don't know. We have to wait to see how it develops. But that would be something that I think would be important to try to have, which I don't think they had that really last year. They could rely on the passing game, but when they needed to run the ball, it wasn't always necessarily there.
Yeah, and there was a big discrepancy between first, I think it was 6 games of the season, and then the second half of the season. There was a big cutoff once you had the 3 running backs go down in the Arizona game. I think that when Vi went down with the surgery, he still felt confident with Marquise Stepp and Stephen Carr being there. But then when both those guys got injured the next week, it completely changed things. It changed how they ran the ball, and their yards per carry went down by like a full yard. So they were actually running the ball pretty well the first half of the season. They weren't running it a ton, but when they did run it, they were successful with it. So I think that they can be successful, and having the running backs and not having a spate of injuries like that, is going to play into it. If you have something happen like that again, you're going to have something similar where we'll see what Amon-Ra St. Brown can do in the backfield type of thing. They made the most of what they could do there. I think they were much more handicapped in that situation in the second half of the season, where in the first half of the season we saw they were able to run the ball with success at times. Still, you didn't feel confident to be like 3rd and 1, we can tell them to play, it doesn't matter type of thing. But I think that they were working and getting better. And I think second year in the offense, I think that will help boost the numbers as well.
And then the one thing on the recruiting side, they did miss on the running backs they tried to go after. So you could bring in a transfer portal running back as well. They ran into numbers problems last year, and it doesn't really get much better this year. So you kind of have to – they didn't address it with recruiting. They couldn't address it with recruiting. They tried to, and they failed. Now you're going to maybe bring someone in the transfer portal, or you could face those same issues all over again.
As far as shotgun,
real quick, I just found the numbers that they were averaging 5.5 yards per carry through the first, I think it was first 7 games. I can't remember what the cutoff was, leading the Arizona game, and averaging 156 yards on the ground per game. And then after that spate of injuries, it was 4.6 yards per carry and only 100 yards per game. Okay. So they were gaining 56 yards per game more on the ground, before the injuries that they had.
And speaking of injuries, Randy on Facebook says, do you have any idea what the timetable will be for ITS to return from knee surgery? How serious was the injury? And then kind of similar, Matt Simmons on YouTube says, who will be held out of spring ball?
Ooh, I don't know. I haven't heard anything about ITS recently. I'm not sure.
I would not expect ITS he would not be back for spring.
Yeah.
I don't from the injury and seeing him after the game, it just did not look like there was going to be a minor injury. It looked like it was something serious. So if he's even back this year, that's kind of the question mark.
Yeah.
JT Daniels has done some work. Don't expect to see him during the spring at all.
Clay Helton said he's going to do a little bit, but
stand.
I don't think he's going to do much.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see what he can do. A couple other guys that have had, Munir McClain is working his way back. Mm-hmm. You should see Kyle Ford and Brew McCoy at full strength in the spring, which will be interesting to see. Ethan Ray should be closing in. He should be full strength. Max Williams, I think he will be back for spring camp. Haven't checked on him recently, but some of the guys that ended the season on the DL, like Tua CV, Nomura, guys like that they were kind of holding them out instead of trying to force them back in. I think you'll see those guys back, especially the guys that were freshmen. They're going to want to be back spring and trying to make an impact as much as they can. But off the top of my head, not a lot of guys are going to be completely out except for the couple that we mentioned.
Adonis Ote had wrist surgery, but Chris had heard that he will be back for spring. But that's something that happened as well.
Back to the offensive line real quick. We got a Cup Fowler, Mario on Periscope. How would Jalen McKenzie look at left tackle with Voorhees going to right tackle? And then what are your thoughts of starting 5 of McKenzie, AVT, so left from right, Jalen McKenzie left tackle, Vera Tucker left guard, Didich at center, Jimmins at right guard, and then Voorhees at right tackle. So
what
kind of
happened
similar.
to Nealon?
Yeah,
Nealon got dumped, I guess.
I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
Nealon's going to be in the lineup. If Didich is good enough to play and force Nealon to either move or for Dietrich to play guard, that's another question. But they love the way that Nealon, is able to decipher defenses at the line of scrimmage. And since there was no changes on the offensive staff, I don't see that changing. Just just listening to Tim Drevno when he talked about how he was able to assess the defense and call out plays and help out a freshman quarterback, Keaton Slovis. I think that they really love Nealon there. Which is why Dietrich was actually going to play, had practiced some guard. Even though if you look at the body types, he's smaller, you would say, you kind of want an inverted V or a V, as far as height on an offensive line, just, so a quarterback can see in the middle.
Yeah.
That's the idea behind it.
You don't want a 6'7" center, is what you're saying.
Yeah, you don't want the 6'9" guy in the middle, and then, you have little tiny, a 5'10" offensive tackle who has short arms, who the defenders go right behind or right by.
Keely gave a little
dinosaur arms.
Yeah,
T-Rex
Tyrannosaurus
arms.
Rex. Yeah.
So you ideally you want a V, and so you want your shortest guy in the middle. If you can just make your hypothetical lineup. And so Justin Dietrich, you would say, oh, he's a center. If you're going to choose between center and guard, you take him because he's a little bit shorter there versus Nealon, who's got is a little bit wider in the shoulders. He's more of a guard body type than Dietrich. That would be ideal. But, I talked with one of the top offensive guys during the season about that and just posed that question. They're like, no, if we put both of them in the game, it'll be Dietrich will be at guard. That's what we've had him practicing there and stuff. We just really like the way that Nealon is able to do all the pre-snap stuff. And so now maybe that changes a little bit with what Dietrich was able to do in the last couple games and show, hey, I can do that too. And maybe he's boosted his way up. But just the way it sounded when talking to this person did not seem like that would be, if they were going to have both of those guys on the field, then Nealon would be the guy in the middle.
What about McKenzie at left tackle? What do you guys think about that? I just think he's going to be right tackle, but
they did get some run and fall camp of him at left tackle when they were trying to move things around, but I just don't. I think he's more of a right tackle than mine. We forgot someone. Mr. Eccles reminded us that Hunter Eccles will not be cleared for contact in spring. So that's someone who will not be participating in spring there.
Which is a bummer because you have a whole different defensive system. You don't know where, these outside linebackers, what they're going to do. So it would have been good to see kind of where he was used.
Mm-hmm. But I'm going to jump into a call. But before we do, I'm going to answer this interesting question from Christian. He says, would you guys rather see USC use two back sets or use the tight ends more? Which group excites you more?
I think the tight ends are deeper, and it's more of a passing offense. I'd rather just see him use the tight ends more.
I'd rather see two backs and throwing it to the backs.
Oh, okay.
Ooh.
Multiple routes.
You're just trying to get Stephen Carr the Heisman somehow. Okay.
He issued an official apology on the Family Feud podcast.
Oh, he
That's
did?
his prediction.
Okay.
He said junior year, and it's passed.
Oh, it is that.
Yeah,
well, thanks, Christian, for the Facebook.
Yes, thank you. Let's go
question.
to our live caller who's been waiting patiently. I appreciate it. I believe it is Keely from Iowa. Hello, you're live on Tunnel Vision.
We're very popular in Iowa.
It's the same people from Iowa.
Yes, very, very popular. Yes, sir. Gentlemen, of course, as your resident Notre Dame fan, Shotgun, I have a beef with you, even though it's not your fault. I'm still going to blame you.
I like that.
That's what I do. We do that too.
Thank you. So USC bought their way out of their game with UC Davis, which is understandable. And I remember Shotgun saying, you don't learn anything by playing UC Davis. I completely agree. And what did they do? Now you play San Jose State. What possibly does USC learn playing San Jose State? And I'm thinking, what, was Irvine Community College already booked? I don't get it. If you're going to replace UC Davis, replace it with a formidable team at least.
And maybe if this was a 2028 game, you could do that.
Yeah.
But I think you were very limited in the teams that were available at the time. And the only reason San Jose State was available is because Georgia bought them out. They made a bank on this, by the way.
Yeah, they made like
$3.5 million. Yeah, it's huge because Georgia.
San Jose State did, not USC.
Because Georgia buys out their contract so that they can play against Clemson. Everyone's excited about that game. They already had a game on the schedule, those two teams, which they played several times in their histories. But they had already got a game for later in the 20s. But they wanted a game sooner. Get those two coaches because you never know in 7 years who's going to be the coach or if the team's going to be good or not. But for USC. when that opens up, and okay, San Jose State's available. All our fans have been railing on this playing an FCS team. Here's an opportunity to make it, happen and change the thing. So I think it was a good move by them to address the fans' concerns. But I agree, you're not going to learn a lot more from San Jose State.
Right.
But San Jose State is a little bit of a step up from UC Davis. It's not going to be a huge step up, but.
I mean, the big reason was because you didn't want to play an FCS school, and
Yeah.
Notre Dame has not done that, UCLA has not done that, and USC has not done that. So you wanted to avoid that. And from what I talked to, you have to kind of blame the previous administration for scheduling it to begin with. If they would have scheduled something better a couple years back, it would have been easier. But then the new administration comes in, and everyone's calling to complain, hey, we don't want to play UC Davis next year. And it's like, okay, well, what's available? And San Jose State became available. You got to give them credit for going out and getting it. If they could have canceled it before January 1st, they would have saved like $250,000 on the buyout. But you can't cancel the game not having a replacement. So they needed to get the replacement before. So, for anyone that was being critical of you should have just canceled it, I don't think you can cancel it until you get a replacement. That one fell out of the sky, and it worked out. If that didn't happen, they were going to have to do something like what Georgia did. You're going to have to try to find someone else a bigger name that would play you, and get them to cancel their FCS school or whatever it is. Like, it would have been pretty complicated. So I give this administration credit for fixing it, but it wasn't their problem to begin with, and it wasn't an easy problem to fix because USC drug their feet and scheduled a game that they didn't need to schedule when they did.
So I think, thank you, Keely, for the call. I think there's like a beacon that goes out in Iowa when one Iowa resident calls the show, another one does, because we have Dave from Iowa on the line.
There must be, I don't know much about Iowa. There must be lots of people that live there, because I assume they think there's a huge demographic.
Yeah, but Dave, you are live on Tunnel Vision. Hello.
Hi, Tunnel Vision. How's it going? I just had a question. What was the thought process of offering a former two-star offensive lineman that's in the transfer portal rather than offering, an offensive lineman that has won a national championship now in the LSU offensive guard? Now, yes, he was a backup, but still, I mean, he knows what it takes to win. What are your thoughts?
Interesting.
Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I think their specific need is tackle, and that's what was available. I think that would be the main reason why. Like, you could bring someone in that was a backup at LSU that was a 4-star or whatever coming out of high school and move them around. But I think when you're looking at, if you want an option to fix your left tackle problem, you pretty much need to take an existing left tackle. Like, I don't think you can get someone that you're going to move. But I don't know as much about him. I don't know if you saw much about the LSU player.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about either of those guys, but also you want a guy that's played versus a guy, hey, maybe he's got some potential, but he's been a backup. You want a guy that you can see the tape, you can evaluate and say, yes, this guy can, especially for a left tackle position. If it was a right guard, that's a whole different story. But the left tackle is such an important position and such a dire need for USC this season, then I think you want someone who's established that they can do the job. Now, can this Akron guy do that? Still to be determined.
We don't know. And if you were trying to add overall depth, I think that's a valid argument. But you had a really specific need.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dave, for the call. We appreciate it. We have all our Iowa callers out of the way. Now we just need our Glendora guys.
Nice.
That's the next
I got
one.
another Periscope one
Sure,
if you
go
want
for it.
from Maddie. For Shotgun, are we going to get more in-depth game breakdowns of formations, etc. this year?
Are we referencing the season totality stuff that has been in the War Room? I could potentially publish some of that for everyone as well. But during season, it's basically
it's a struggle.
It's as much as I can get out.
Yeah. He's basically putting out as much as possible.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason we can get the film breakdown is because I come in and help him. So he's swamped during the season.
But that's a good idea, though. But some of the stuff that we have that you've put in the War Room, it's already there. We can kind of put it out as free content and let you guys kind of take a look and see. And that would give you, it's a great opportunity. Like, hey, I love this stuff. Well, you can get it if you subscribe to USCfootball.com.
Ta-da.
Check it out. $10 a month.
We'll
It's a
have
pretty
a
good
meeting
deal.
about it afterwards. But no, I'll see if there's any more kind of data to cull from it as well. Because I have my spreadsheets that I have that I do all the participation data and all the formation breakdowns and all that stuff. there's like 17 different tabs on it.
You can ask him like random questions, and he'll be like, "I'll look it up." It's a lot of info.
That's what he just talked about. Like the first 7 games, they averaged,
Yeah.
5 yard per carry less. Like he pulled up a spreadsheet tab and like there it was.
I would also like to point out that's when they've called run plays. That's not just going on the stat sheet and saying, "Oh, well, the sacks count and all that stuff." No,
Yeah.
that's called run plays
without sacks in there or anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or scrambles that turned into
Yeah,
whatever.
don't count the scrambles either.
We have a question from Coach V on YouTube who says, "Will we see more of Dorian Hewitt this year? What are the chances of him starting?"
Watch out for Dorian Hewitt now.
Yeah.
He's the guy the coaches really, really like. And now let's see what the new coaching staff
Right.
thinks.
The old
about
coaches
him.
did. So.
Yeah.
Sure, that's the point.
Well, I think if you can go up to Clay Helton. Clay Helton really liked
Okay.
Dorian Hewitt as well. So, but yeah, I think that he really impressed the former regime. We'll see what he does with the new coaching staff. I think he really impressed himself as a cornerback. He didn't know that he could play cornerback. When they put him out there initially, he told me after I think the Arizona State game, he's like, they put me out there, and I was like, why am I playing cornerback? I'm not a cornerback.
It was like the second or first play that he was put in the game was the 2-point conversion, and he batted down the ball. It was really impressive.
Yeah.
And he had a couple more plays there, but just like when they put him out there for fall camp, he was like, I don't know what I'm doing out here. And then he started making a couple plays, and his confidence grew and grew. And I think that he's a guy that has the skill set to play that position. And it's interesting that he didn't play. That he was a really good safety on a championship team in Texas, and was not rated highly, was under-recruited, I would say, and he has a chance to be pretty good. This might be kind of the inverse Marvell Tell, where you get a high school safety and he becomes a college cornerback versus Marvell Tell, being a college safety and becoming an NFL
That's
cornerback.
true. Thanks, Coach V, for that one.
Yep. Ryan, is there any more Paris?
Yeah, I got another one. Trojan 1604. This is more on the recruiting side. How much will Armand Hawkins, he means Armand Hawkins Jr., bring to our future recruiting? So he was the most recent, recruiting analyst, recruiting support staff hire. It's Chris Hawkins' brother, played at Idaho, I believe. Was involved in all that ground zero stuff. So definitely brings some cachet to that recruiting department.
Well, he knows all the ground zero people. He wasn't really involved, and that was kind of the things where the question mark about persons with that. I can't. IAWP.
There's some NCAA rule. Like basically, if you worked in the high school ranks and then a college wants to hire you as a non-full-time assistant, like you can't recruit anyone you've been associated with for like 2 years prior or 2 years after. So it's kind of a mess. So he was around it because his dad runs Ground Zero, but he wasn't
a
necessarily
coach or
working
anything
there.
because they've had former USC DB Anthony Brown. They've had had some guys that actually worked there. Chris Hawkins had done some stuff working with guys individually and whatnot. So it's not quite the same there, but he knows all those kids because his dad knows all those kids. So that's a big boost for USC to be able to stay in the running with those guys, I would say, because Chris Hawkins knows all of them as well, and he's at Arizona State, so you don't want to give up. So now you're gonna have a brother versus brother recruiting battles, which is really cool.
That is cool.
Really fun.
They're almost the same age too. Like they're like a couple months apart or something.
So Armand was I think a year older than Chris as far as schooling, because he was at Idaho. They played each other. And I looked through. I actually still have USC Idaho photos on my camera, and I was searching through to see if I could find any of him, but I think I'd already previously taken them off.
Yeah.
You kind of mentioned the beef between ASU and USC, meaning the recruitingness. We had a question from Daryl.
The recruitingness.
We had a question from Daryl who said, "What's up with the Twitter fight between SC and ASU?" And it kind of goes to USC's motto. They always have a motto each year, and this year it's "Take Back the West," which, if you're going to have a statement like that that's semi-vague and also provocative, you're going to get some response. So USC did get some heat for it. And ASU, for some reason, thought that USC was talking about them. And they said, "Oh, we own the..." What was it, Chuck? And they were like, "We already have the West," or something like that.
Yeah, they were like, "We own the West," because under Herm Edwards, they've done really well recruiting California in particular. And, they've gotten a lot of All-Americans from the various games and done really well. And, we'll see if they continue, if the win-loss record starts getting a little bit better for them, because they've been pretty consistent with Herm Edwards. They haven't really, taken that next step up to 9 or 10 wins yet. So that's the next step for them. But recruiting-wise, they've done pretty good because Antonio Pierce there, former Long Beach Poly head coach, former NFL linebacker, and they have all the NFL experience on that staff, and that's an alluring trait, for a coaching staff. And that was one of the things that USC could sell with Monty Kiffin or Clancy Pendergast. It's like, this guy's been in the NFL, he's been to Super Bowls. Come learn from him. They now have that with Marvin Lewis and, just the plethora of guys they have on that staff. Now, one thing they did is they got younger this offseason, Arizona State did, by bringing in Prentice Gill, former USC grad assistant, bringing in Chris Hawkins. So they got rid of some older guys, brought in some young blood. And those guys, both of those two guys in particular, can recruit Southern California really well. And I think it was more – I think people made more of it, but it was more like us going at each other in a text chain.
Yeah.
And it was just on social media,
Because those guys were very friendly. They were on social media when they were at USC, and now it's sort of just like spilled out. And I think it's smart on ASU's part, because when I thought of what that statement was, they're talking about Oregon, bringing in the offensive lineman that the Shotgun mentioned, or Justin Flo or Kayvon Thibodeau. And ASU's like, hey, we've got a bunch of Southern California guys who don't forget us. We're also poached your people. So don't just be poking fun at Oregon. You basically like, you need to poke fun at us because we've taken guys too.
So, okay, the first time that I saw Take Back the West, and I could be wrong, was when Dante Williams put it in his notes column when he was leaving Oregon to USC, which kind of would make sense why it's alluding to Oregon as well. But the whole text thread thing that you mentioned, Shotgun, the first person who tweeted it from ASU was not related to Prentice or Hawkins. It was someone else, and then Gavin kind of went in, and then Prentice and Hawkins joined in. So it was a little bit of a beef. It wasn't too friendly.
I still don't think it's that much. I mean, because you get Gavin involved, you get Chris Hawkins involved, you get Prentice involved. Those guys are all just good natured, cracking jokes type of guys. So I think that's kind of what you get.
Yeah, they would argue on social media about who had a better 3-point shot or whatever. Now it's going to be like which school they represent. They would just. It is kind of like a text thread in that sense that they're just talking to each other. Now they happen to be at different schools.
Yeah, agreed. We have a question from Raphael on Facebook who says, I know this hasn't happened since the Pete Carroll era, but I notice many schools still do field testing in the winter and summer, as in 40-time shuttle, cone drills, and bench. Does SC not do this anymore, or what?
They think they still did as of a little while ago. It's not something that they really publicize. Aaron Osmus does like to do stuff on social media, but it's mostly like weightlifting stuff. We don't see as much of you might see Gavin Morris in his story when they're doing some conditioning things out on the field, but I don't know if they haven't publicized them, but I'm not sure if they're doing 40 times and things like that.
No, when recruits come to campus and they come for a camp and they're a 5-star guy, they go through the same thing too. USC has that data themselves because they want to know when that guy actually runs.
Yeah.
Oh, he says he's a 4.4. What is he actually? Okay, he's
4.6.
4.62.
Yeah.
4.62 is not bad in high school. People need to understand that. Not
Right,
everybody runs a 4.4. If you run a 4.4 in high school, you're legit.
Yeah.
It's very rare that happens. Stop hand timing. Get some electronic times. But so USC is going to do that for their own players too. I would be shocked if they are not doing those type things. Do those get publicized? No, not necessarily. Maybe a player tells you I've improved this in the off season, and sometimes it's I've added 100 pounds on my bench press, or I've added I'm running the 40 a little, or I'm running faster. A lot of times they don't publicize their times in particular because you get a lot of, I don't know the right word, negative scouting, I guess, based on times and stuff. It happens, when I'm covering college baseball, you get the same thing based on velocities and stuff. But when guys see them in person, that's when they can make their own own decision on guys and whether or not they're legit prospects. You'd rather have that than someone see your time and be like, well, that guy's not a prospect, and never go see him.
Yeah. It's funny, they, with the combine just wrapping up, they were showing I think the top 3 wide receivers in the NFL all didn't have really good 40 times. Who's the dude in Houston that's awesome? What's his name?
Hopkins.
Yeah, Hopkins. Yeah, he was 4.71 or something. One of the best receivers in the league. I think that Michael Thomas, the guy at Ohio State, he was killing it for New Orleans, and Drew Brees. It was same. They're 4.69 or something. Those guys didn't have great times.
Johnson's nephew.
Yeah.
So it's speed is one thing, but speed is probably much more important for DBs than receivers because receivers can still get open. If you can get by guys, that's huge. If you can Gary Bryant guys, as we can call it, then that's great. If you can get behind and blow by people, but in the NFL, it's more about. And I thought Mike Mayock made a really good point. The now Raiders GM, he was asked about why receivers a lot of times early round draft picks they struggle early in their careers. He said they're not used to a man press covering you.
Yeah.
You know, it's different when you have an 18-year-old freshman, then you go and it's a 35-year-old vet who's, yoked up, or Richard Sherman's out there on you. That's a lot different. Different.
He's put his hand in the chest of many a young receiver.
Yes.
He knows what to do, and you're like, whoa, no one never punched me in the chest like that before. Like, yep.
And
no.
you know how quick a 4.240 is when you get punched in the chest like that?
It's not that quick.
Suddenly it's 5.5 because you're still on the line of scrimmage. So speed plays up, but you got to get off the release. You got to do a lot of different things. It's just one element, and it's more of a fan-driven thing to pay attention to the 40 times. They are something that coaches pay attention to. They also are looking at that split offensive lineman. They don't care about that actual 40 time. They care about that 10 seconds.
Yeah.
How long how many times are offensive linemen running 40 yards and making a play? Not really happening.
Yeah.
Maybe once or twice a year. So it's more important than that 10 yards.
I just saw a replay from one of the old Dallas games where I think it was like Larry Allen. It was an interception, like Romo or someone throws an interception, and was it the big tackle or whatever, like from back, or he's running down the sideline and makes the tackle. So offensive lineman, like some linebacker or whatever, like intercepts the ball, and he has like an angle on him and like tackles him to save the touchdown or something. It's crazy. This big offensive lineman. Was it? I forget who it was. Someone on the Twitter or something tell us, but it was big Dallas, tackle that had to go around and make the play.
So we've reached the top of the hour. We have a caller on the line. I'm going to go to him, and then we're going to come back and do some rapid-fire questions.
Yeah.
We have some good questions in the queue.
These were good. And Keely, I think you did a great job putting a lot of the questions up on the screen. That's what I've always loved to see. The YouTube and the Facebooks up there.
Trying.
And people, like
I'm
Raphael,
trying.
you could see his face. Like he looks like a cool dude. Like Raphael, he had a
Shouts
cool
to
name.
Raphael,
Yeah, and it's a cool dude.
I put out the beacon for Glendora, and they answered. John from Glendora is on the line. Hello, you're live on Tunnel Vision.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm waiting for Ryan to roast me again like he usually does.
No problem, John.
So,
You're the head of
no
the Matt
worries.
Fink
You're
fan
gonna roast
club.
me like you do. Nah, and this ain't a Matt Fink guy. I'm sorry to tell you guys that.
It's okay. It's good.
But yeah, my biggest question for the year is the leadership role. With Michael Pittman leaving, Austin Jackson leaving, who is the real leader that's going to step into that role to lead this team? I don't know. I don't see it. I see all their social media posts, but I just see Michael Pittman as one of those guys, old school kind of player, tough mentality. So I don't know who's going to be that guy. Who do you guys think?
John, what a terrible question, man.
No,
I'm just kidding. That's a great. No, it's a really good question because. And USC over the years have had like more like the Sam Darnolds of the world would lead, but they were not
very quietly.
Yeah, and I think Michael Pittman was the same sort of thing. He's worked throughout his college career to feel better just being, as his public speaking ability. But I think he was a really good leader. A guy like Austin Jackson, going through what he did with the bone marrow transplant. I mean, it's a really good point. Who's going to be that person to step up? You looked at the quarterback. Is Keaton Slovis stand up on the table kind of guy? Probably not, but he can be a good leader.
Hold on a minute.
You think he can be?
Hold
Come
on
on.
a minute. We heard stories from offensive linemen. I believe it was, which game was it, Shotgun?
The Stanford game, wasn't it?
Yeah, his first game. He said after that first drive where I don't think it resulted in a touchdown. He came up to the offensive lineman and he's like, "We're not letting the ball drop again this whole game." Like he apparently got in people's faces. That's what Austin Jackson told us. So he could be fiery.
Maybe behind closed doors, that's where you need it to be. You don't need it to be like out in public or whatever.
Showy, yeah.
I don't even think Sam Darnold was really that much of a leader. He was just such a shy guy, and I think he's got to learn that in the NFL even more. Michael Pittman is interesting, and it's similar where he's not a very vocal guy. However, listen to the players, listen to the receivers, and listen to Kyle Ford and Brew McCoy talk about him.
Yeah,
and that's how you know he's a leader.
Yeah.
Kyle Ford talking about playing special teams. He's like, when you look at Michael Pittman, how do you not? And, I kind of asked him, like, do you pick his brain on situations like that about special teams? And he's like, yeah, I've been asking him questions all the time. And that's where your leadership can come from within a position group. And this is a question on the offensive side, that we've been asking for
Years.
4 years, 5 years now.
Yes.
Is who's going to step up and be that leader. I think there were more. You had more of it this year with Pittman and Austin Jackson. Austin Jackson didn't say a bunch either. He was much more of a behind closed doors type of guy as well. But I think Slovis is, because JT's not that, and that's what was one of the questions. JT's a quieter guy too. Slovis though is a guy that is more. I don't know the right word, but he's bouncy on the sideline. He's bouncy, patting guys on the shoulder, let's go type of thing. And you need that. You need the veteran who's quiet too at the same time. You need that combination.
Do you have a guy that does this on the sideline for like the whole game? Do you remember?
Cody Kessler.
That was all. So Sam Darnold too. He would.
Yeah.
Do that. Yeah.
Cody Kessler used to do interviews like that. That's what I remember.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think that it is a question, and I think that you got to look at those offensive linemen that have been around that group together. Now they don't have to do it individually, but I think together, the 4 guys that are remaining from that class that came in together, I think that's where you need your leadership to come from. Whether it's Brett Nealon and Elijah Vera Tucker, that group, someone stands out, and those not necessarily are yelling, screaming guys. None of those guys are Zach Banner. But collectively, I think that they can be the ones that can kind of lead that offensive group. And Amon-Ra St. Brown is the guy you look to and go, I want to be like him.
Yeah.
And he said as much. He said, I'm going into my upperclassmen. I'm going to be a junior. It's time for me to step up and kind of take the baton, if you will, and be that leader. So that's something he's at least cognizant of going forward. Do you think – sorry, Ryan.
Well, real quick. So do you guys think that having Clay Helton as the head coach, who's not the fiery guy, you don't really get that to spill off into the players? Like if you're Zach Banner and that's just the way you are, you're going to be that way. But are you going to develop like the vocal leader when you're not really getting that from the kind of the culture of the team because for the head coach?
The whole remember the Titans attitude reflects leadership captain
sort of thing, yeah. Yeah,
It's
okay.
tough to say. I mean, you want your coaching staff to actually help develop leadership, which is taking guys aside and say, hey, you need to talk to this person, this person. I don't know if that happens at USC. That's something that's behind closed doors. You don't really know unless someone comes out and tells you. Clay Helton came over to me and told me, hey, I need to speak up to him. And talking with kids in different sports and stuff, it becomes much more apparent the smaller the group. You can see it a little bit more then. But so with a group of 105 guys, it's hard to say, if there's someone that's doing that all the time, and it's hard to do it as a coaching staff when you do have 105 guys.
Yeah.
So, but it's something that you should actively be trying to do. So some coaches have leadership groups and leadership gathering or whatever. They bring kids in. You have either your captains or you got 8 guys that come, and those are your leaders, and they sit down and discuss what's going on with the team as a whole. I had a coach do that with us in college. Like we had a senior group, and he said, we came in once a week to discuss what was going on with the team and what we thought would need to be done better, what the coach thought we needed to be doing better as a whole team, and then we passed along that message to the younger guys that are near us.
And that's where it's going to be interesting. Aaron Austin is being in his second year. Something he talked about specifically when he was on our show was that he kind of with his staff tried to recognize who the leaders were and put them in leadership positions in the weight room. And so do those leadership roles change in this new off season? How has that developed so far? I'm curious about. But what I was going to ask earlier is, do you think that this will be a third consecutive year in a row where we see 1 offensive captain and 3 defensive captains?
I think Amon-Ra St. Brown and Keaton Slovis could both get in.
Yeah. You also still have Tyler Vaughns, who's a 5th-year senior as well.
True. He's a little bit quiet, though.
He's kind of quiet. Would Elijah Vera Tucker get a chance to be a captain?
It's hard. I haven't even gone down the captain path yet. Let's see how they do in spring. See
Yeah.
who's leading then.
That's a good point.
Good, yeah.
We're a little ahead of ourselves. But thank you, John, for the call. We appreciate it. We appreciate
I didn't
our
roast you, John, so there we go.
Glendora callers. Yeah, that's true. You got by. Let's go to a question from Augustine on Facebook who says, does USC have any players that could position switch to running back or any other position of need? I believe we got this question on the Peristyle podcast this past week.
Yeah, I think we did. What were we talking? So the Brew McCoy one's the most interesting, right?
It was fun.
Brandon Peely as a running back.
That'd
be more of a. I mean, you don't see it happening, but it'd be more of a fun play. Get a couple plays there.
Tight end.
Brew McCoy because of the new defense. I mean, who knows? Maybe we haven't. He could get over there. Isaac Taylor Stewart could go to running back or something like that. I don't remember who else did we talk about. Did we mention anyone else?
As far as playing running back,
There could be some,
Or positions of need.
Yeah, so there's going to be minor ones, like Elijah Vera Tucker if he moves out to tackle, like those, like little things, or safety to corner and nickel,
Yeah.
things like that. But
like
if you
a
talk about
leave Jim and switch.
yeah, like big ones, it's hard. Like Brew McCoy would be the one that has the best chance of happening, I would think.
I mean, Liam Jimmons is the first guy to really play after switching sides of the ball or switching significant positions in I don't know how many years.
It's been a long time.
So if a guy switches position, usually it's because we got plenty of guys that are better than you on the other side. So usually it doesn't really matter, is what I'm trying to say.
We shall see. I don't think so though. I don't think it would be
Another cool name on the Facebook thing, Augustine. Very cool.
Augustine. Yeah, we have some cool names on Facebook. We have a question for Shotgun on YouTube. We promised this as well. We haven't talked about it yet. Big T37 says, Shotgun, is USC men's basketball in the dance if they beat the Bruins this Saturday, or do they need to win 2 more games in the Pac-12 tourney?
No, I think if they get one more win, then that should lock it up. Beating UCLA at home would be great because UCLA is on fire right now.
Yeah.
UCLA is getting ranked in the top 25 by some people right now. So it's going to be a big challenge with the way UCLA has been playing. They've played bad in some games and still been able to find ways to win. I watched a little bit of the game against Arizona. They're down in that game, come back. Defense plays, and that's why USC has been in pretty much every game this season, save the Marquette and the Washington games, is because their defense has been really good, especially the second half of the year. Their offense, there's been big question marks about, and they can be streaky. When they hit a couple of 3-pointers, it changes the whole dynamic of the offensive sets for USC, because then teams can't compress down on Onyeka Okongwu and Nick Rakocevic in the lane, and when they take care of the ball. That's a big thing. Arizona State really pressured them. They had 14 turnovers in the first half after having 24 turnovers in the game in Tempe, including I think it was 16 or 18 in the second half of that game, which is why they blew that game. They had 14 in the first half on Saturday. Was it yesterday? Jeez, that seems
Yesterday,
like so
yeah.
long ago.
Right?
Because it was an early game.
I've
that's
seen
why.
3 baseball games since then. But in the second half, they only had 5. And only one of them was against the full court pressure that Arizona State had. So can they find ways to just take care of the basketball?
Yeah.
And why?
It seemed like they made better decisions in the second half of that game when they were dealing with the press. So I don't know if Andy Edfield did something, but they weren't there weren't these high risk plays that you're getting picked off.
Why are there so many high risk plays? Why does Andy Enfield not stop them from doing that? Well, they have 5 freshmen, and your main ball handlers are freshmen. It happened. That's kind of what's going to happen. Now, Ethan Anderson, as a senior, will not make the same mistakes he is making now. The biggest question mark, or maybe even disappointment, is that Quentin Adlish hasn't been a guy that you can turn to just take care of the ball, be the point guard. He's not able to deal with the length that Pac-12 defenders actually have. Now, he played great yesterday. Had his best game as a Trojan yesterday. Locked down Remy Martin for a good part of the game. Was huge on the defensive end. Hit 2 threes. He played great. If he can get that kind of effort from Quentin Adlish, it changes things, because if he can control the ball and not turn it over and just be a guy be that glue guy that they need, that's such a difference maker. We don't need you to be a playmaker.
Yeah. That's something Enfield can do. Is like, okay, we're turning the ball over. We're going to put him in and try to just settle things down a little bit.
And if he could have been that guy all season, I think it changes things a little bit. But he struggled, like I said, with the length of Pac-12 defenders and, just picking up his dribble at wrong times. Daniel Tomey is similar, just not making great decisions, even though, he's a senior as well, grad transfers. Those guys should make better decisions than they have at times. But a lot of the issues are young ball handlers. So Ethan Anderson, Kyle Sturdivant, before he left on his bereavement, who's been gone for I think 7 games now, back in Georgia, just buried his father. Our thoughts are with him. But also Elijah Weaver. He's the X factor on the team, in my opinion. When he plays well, USC's on a different level. They're a team that could be a Sweet 16 Elite 8 team when he plays really well. But there are times when he plays really bad. Yesterday he had 5 turnovers. You can't play him in the second half.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, if they can settle him in and he can be just you can calm him and be just a positive influence, not have to try to do too much. it kind of changes things a lot. But yeah, I think one win, UCLA this week will do it. If they
Yeah, the home
don't,
sweep against Arizona schools were huge. Like that's
massive. Especially,
barring some kind of collapse and not winning another game, it seems like they're going to be in.
and it'll be interesting if they can beat UCLA. There is still a path for them to get a top 4 seed, which is huge because you get a bye in the first round of the Pac-12 tournament. Just that extra day off that you don't have to play. Everyone in the Pac-12 has been dangerous at times this season.
Yeah.
Washington State has been able to beat a couple teams, and they're terrible. But
Didn't
they have
Stanford just get a win too, or something?
Stanford's been pretty good, though.
Yeah.
Stanford just beat Colorado, which is good for USC because USC's trying to catch Colorado. They need Colorado to lose to Utah next week, and if that happens and they beat UCLA, they will move into the top 4 if I have done the math right there. And then they get a bye. They can avoid the first game, and hopefully someone gets upset and they get a lesser opponent in their first game, and they have a chance to win 3 games and be there in the final. I mean,
that's the only thing that when you're on the bubble, like sometimes a bye might not be good because you get a better opponent right away.
But I think why I said that a win this week will get them in, but not necessarily just one win will get them in, is because if they don't, they'll be the 5 seed. They'll be 5 or the 6, and they'll get Washington or Washington State, and that win's not going to add anything to the resume.
Okay, yeah.
Whereas if you lose to one of those 2 teams,
Then it's okay.
kills the resume. So I think it's big to get the win this weekend against UCLA.
Ryan, I just want to congratulate you. You made that all the way through, took it seriously, didn't
Yeah, no,
shut
it's
it down.
they actually have a chance to make the tournament. So I've watched some games, and when I go to games, I only like to sit like courtside with members of the athletic department. But we'll watch from the television and stuff too.
Boy. Continuing rapid fire, XX on YouTube says, with a new recruiting staff, how many years will it take for the Trojans to get back to having a top 4 class consistently?
Like 15 years. No,
Ryan.
it could be tomorrow. Like it's really, you got to win games. Like go out, beat Alabama, and it's a much better recruiting staff than it was before.
That's the biggest thing. Is if you win games, then it could be, be next year. It could be 2 years. If you don't win games, then it'll be when they win games.
Yeah, you beat Alabama. That's going to certainly help. You're going to make a playoff run or something. After the season, you move on to a different coach. Like that could move the needle. There's a lot of things that could move the needle. It could happen pretty quickly. USC can do it. USC has to get out of its own way, and they haven't been able to do that for a while.
Trek Ranger on YouTube says, will Ben Griffiths flourish under the new special teams coach?
He has to, but we're not going to talk about him
No
because
preseason punter hype.
Yeah.
Our new rule.
But Sean Snyder was a All-American punter himself. The former Kansas State punter, actually, we put up a story. He was, just gushing over the kind of coach that Snyder is. And, if you want to talk about his strengths as a special teams coordinator, one of the people at Kansas State I talked to is, working with the kickers, working with the punters, working with the snappers. He's really known for that. So if Ben Griffiths, if there's a chance for him to have a huge year, this is a great coach for him to do it with.
I probably should wait until actually talking to Sean Snyder once, but I'm just going to go ahead and go for it because there's so many All-American lists. I'm calling it Ben Griffiths All-American.
Nice.
You wouldn't even do that last year.
The anti-hype.
And was I correct about it last year?
I'm just saying. Matt Simmons says, could you see Brew McCoy or Kyle Ford taking a starting job coming out of spring?
I mean, no.
Yes.
Okay, I'll say no.
Ooh.
Yes, because Drake London could potentially not be there. So
Sure.
they could be the outside guy, and Amon-Ra St. Brown could still be the inside guy.
Like,
Well,
where would
Amon-Ra
Drake
wants to be
London be?
outside.
Playing basketball. But he, coming out of the spring. No, I'm saying coming out of the spring on the depth chart, they'd be the starter.
Okay.
I'm not saying they start the first game. It says a starting job coming out of spring.
Okay.
Coming out of spring.
They wouldn't be lifted on the depth
Fine.
chart ahead of Drake London.
I think they could.
Okay.
Family Feud over there. I like
Okay.
it. Well done, guys.
Well, so, who knows?
Mitchell has a question that shows that he is not a member of the Peristyle because we put this in the war room. He's asking, any Chris Claiborne news?
Guess you'll have to read the
Gotta go
word.
read the War Room there.
Oh,
Yeah, former
sorry, Mitchell. I tried.
former Butkus Award winner at USC.
Mitchell also asked Ryan, what's your crystal ball for Miller Moss? Shotgun, that's kind of your dude.
I'm not going to speak on this because I'm going to be writing the story when he commits. So
Oh, nice. So that's your dude. I think it looks like USC wants to bring in 2 quarterbacks because, again, not getting Bryce Young. So I think they're a decent shot at him. But they like Jake Garcia a lot. Keely just put up a video with him. You want to check that
Talk
out?
to him about it.
Yeah, we put up some highlights of Jake Garcia too.
Yeah, lots of.
In about a week, you should know.
Yeah, we'll know more about the Mr. Moss.
Interesting. Shotgun putting some Easter eggs there. John on Facebook says, "Is Brew McCoy 100% over his illness from last year? Will he practice with no restrictions?"
We don't know.
I think so. I think he's 100%. I haven't talked to him
Yeah,
specifically.
he hasn't told us that.
To
But
a source to speak on, but all indications, and the last time I did chat with him, it sounded like he was going to be 100% for.
yeah, but it's like kind of one of those things. Like, okay, Daniel Montour-Bebe's back. I want to see him on the practice field. Like,
Yeah,
I
you
want to see
kinda
Brew McCoy
Gotta hold your
put
breath.
pads on and get out in the practice field. So
Yeah, we had a question as well about is Solomon Tulialapupu going to be good for full contact this spring? I don't think he's going to be full contact. I don't think they're going to let him be, but
But if he's practicing, that's still a win considering the last 2 years.
I'm
he had that one good practice. I remember.
Pretty good practice.
But as far as you how you were going with Daniel Montour-Bebe or Brew McCoy, I'm going back to my Solomon Tulialapupu rule that we're not really talking about him until he practices for a week straight.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the rule.
Because even with Solomon Tulialapupu, we saw that one practice. Like, oh my God, he like batted this ball away, did this, and then that was like the only thing, the only
The only
day.
practice.
Yeah.
Ever.
So we want to see all those guys for a week.
I wasn't there that practice too.
Bobby
was
says,
glorious.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I still remember the pop that he made on someone. Bobby says, "Do you see the team having more uniformity? Coaches wearing the same clothes. Is that a big deal for most, or is it a big deal for a minority?"
Is that a question referencing how they dress in games? Because in games, there's a reason why coaches don't wear the same color. I don't know if you guys know this, just kind of a behind the scenes maybe if you don't know. But coaches wear different colors so that position groups can identify their coach immediately. You know, I'm looking for the coach in the white shirt every time rather than I'm looking for my coach's face.
Yeah.
And it makes it that much easier. So that's why they wear, they'll have different colored hats, or that's why you see teams in different attire on a sideline.
But I think
don't know
some
if that's
teams
what
wear.
you're referencing.
I think some teams wear it uniformly, and I think that's just been one of the criticisms that fans were. When you're trying to find more criticisms, like that would be one of them. But if
Reggie
there's
Bush, that was one of his criticisms during UC's warm-ups.
well, then the players all look differently. The players don't need to look differently. But that's
the uniformity as far as the team wearing the same stuff is correct, but the question was coaches wearing the same clothes, which
Yeah.
if that's what it's referencing, there's a reason why they do that.
yeah. And I haven't heard of anything changing there, but that would be coming from an assistant. From one of the new assistants, like a Todd Orlando's, like this is the way we would do it, or Mike Bone and them wanting that. But Clay Helton's still the head coach, so I don't see whatever they were doing before changing.
We have a question from Raphael who says, "Do you think ITS will maybe move to a safety position?"
Let's see him get healthy first before we make a distinction.
Yeah.
That's something that Chris
Distinction,
Trevino's talked about, where he thinks it would be an interesting switch. But
Or
not
running
necessarily
back.
chance.
We already mentioned that.
No.
I mean, if he's out for a lengthy time and by the time he comes back, there's three guys in front of him that are suddenly All-American, then that's when that may be a possibility because you want to get on the field or you transfer somewhere else.
Hugh Fisher says, "Do you know when Clay Helton's contract expires?"
So we were told it's not public because it's a private institution, but 2023 is when most people have reported. So, 4 more seasons, like 20, 21, 22, and 23. Yeah, 4 seasons.
Randy says, "What do you think of the chances of seeing Brew McCoy get some playing time on the defensive side of the ball?"
That's
Probably
a hard
slim,
one.
yeah.
The interesting part of that is the relationship with Todd Orlando and the fact that he was at Texas last year. If they have a good relationship, and Todd Orlando has seen him, or he was the one that recruited him at Texas, and he loves him, maybe he talks Clay Helton into, hey, let me get 6 plays a game with him.
The fact that he was on the same team for like a spring, and I think he did pretty well there at receiver, but were there meetings that they said, oh, we could try him over here? And maybe I don't know. I'll have to check with our Texas people if he did a couple practices there or something. But if he did, it's a great point, then there would be more of an up. But we just haven't seen USC do that where
Dory is the only player
Yeah.
that we've seen in the last 10 years, maybe.
Yeah. Brew's another 5-star guy, and if they think he can be that kind of dynamic playmaker, maybe. But I think it's tougher. Yeah, it'd be great for us. It'd just be fun to see. You know.
The most important thing for him though is to lock down receiver first.
Yes.
And that may be something that further along in his career, you start saying, hey, you've done enough, you've proven yourself. If this is something you're interested in, we'll give you an opportunity to do that as well, rather than trying to do as a freshman and try to do both and not learning either one of them really well.
Yeah. Rainey has another good question. He says, if the defense and special teams could both improve into the top 40 in the country and the offense comes in the top 15, how do you think that would relate to wins and losses this season?
More?
Yeah, more wins.
More? Yes, but I think, Shotgun, this is something you and I talk about a lot. It's just the hidden yards that USC had in special teams and how poor they were. How do you think that will just affect USC if they're kind of in the just the neutral as far as not making poor plays?
Well, they were 130th in kickoff return yardage or something, like kickoff returns. It was like, that's bad. Like those are all those hidden yards.
That would be
are
impressive because there's only 129 teams ranked in Division I.
But I think Akron got in there twice because they had to but no, they've been bad.
No, I think they were actually like 127.
Okay.
They were like one of the.
Oh, so they're better than I thought. Okay, good.
Well, they couldn't be 130 because it's not possible. But yeah, they're like the third worst team in the country.
Ulau on YouTube, keeping with the special teams theme, says, with all the numbers that Snyder has to work with in the special teams, do you think or do you believe that he will get the job done? How much improvement can we expect to see?
I expect to see a lot of improvement. I mean, like Keely said, they're just hidden yardage. They're just to be neutral. I think he'll work really well with the specialists themselves, and then curious to see scheme-wise what changes in the return game, punt block, all that kind of stuff. So, it would be hard to be worse. I think it's going to be significantly better, and just that alone could be like an extra win or something on the season, I would think.
Don't underestimate the value of a Gary Bryant, having a true returner back there too.
Yeah.
They haven't had that since Adoree left, basically. So having him back there, and he can be a dynamic guy that makes guys miss and still has speed too, could be a game changer there because they haven't really had that. Basically on every return, in my opinion, you have to break one tackle at least.
Right.
There's very few times where you just clear sailing. Like the Michael Pittman touchdown, you run a trick punt return kind of, and you get that. That's the rarity. Not that, you just completely run by and our blocking is so good that no one ever gets a chance to hit them.
But I think on just the average return, you want the blocking to be better. So it's not necessarily going for a touchdown, but just, you get it past the 25 if you keep returning the ball. And so you get to the 30 instead of the 18 a whole bunch of times. Like that makes a big difference.
So to add to, every touchdown return usually has a broken tackle. Usually it's one, not 3 or 4 in the first 5 yards.
True. Yeah. When USC gets a good special teams play, it was usually an individual effort, not wow, that was really well. I mean, it could be some trick play that happens randomly, but not
a collective.
It was it was very rare when the entire unit did well together.
Yep.
There were times when they would block really well and they would miss a hole or something, but it was just rare that everyone was getting their block type of thing.
Yep. We have a question from Racer X who says, do you think we'll see more discipline with the players due to the new coaching staff?
Sounds like it.
Yeah, it sounds like Todd Orlando,
On Gavin's Insta story, Craig Niver had a full-on drum and was banging it during the weight routine, and I was like, "This is intense." So there's some intensity happening there.
Seems like it. We'll wait and see when we talk to the coaches on Tuesday, but that's the kind of general feeling that it's going to be a little bit different feel.
We have another question as far as that goes. Eric Neal, I'm not sure if we can answer this before we actually see spring practices, but he says, have there been any noticeable changes in preseason preparation from the old coaches to the new ones? Any tangible signs of better leadership, or are we still just hoping this new crew is different?
I mean, there's signs from seeing their resumes and what they've done before, but as far as implementing, getting a quick Insta story every once in a while, I don't think that's going to give you the best idea. We have to, like Keely said, you got to start watching spring and see what they're doing.
Yeah.
But the one thing about the Insta story is seeing some of those defensive coaches in the weight room with them.
Yeah.
True.
When did you see Clancy Pendergast in any Instagram story?
Good.
That was not his MO.
Maybe it was in his contract, like I can't be in Gavin Morris's Instagram, something like that. They've been out in the road recruiting too, so we've seen them in recruiting spots where maybe some of the other coaches weren't doing it in January or February, where they were, or like, late February after signing day stuff, where before, if they're doing an in-home visit, you might see like a Clancy Pendergast, but you weren't seeing them where like we've seen Todd Orlando over the last few weeks.
You didn't hear Clancy Pendergast's name brought up by recruits.
Yeah.
You have heard that already with Orlando.
Tamatsud on YouTube says, what are the chances that Mike Bone made the patient and grown-up decision that us fans could never make versus he made a mistake or it was out of his hands?
I think those are all. I mean, you had a pros and cons list, and I'm not sure. I mean, maybe it's the grown-up decision. Maybe it's just really though. There was a lot of thought that went into it. He didn't have a lot of time to be at USC. He was only there for 3 weeks. He didn't. When we had him on the podcast, he didn't really want to talk about all that much. But just from our understanding, it was more about there's pros and cons to doing it. And all the fans wanted you to do it. So one of the cons was if you keep him, the fans are going to hate you, and that's basically what happened. But USC's house was such in I get the reasons why. I'm not sure it was still the right decision, but with USC's house being such so disorderly, would you have been able to be in a good position to bring in a new coach? And I think the thought process is if it's not a great year, then you'd be in a much better spot. In 2020 than you were in 2019. I'm not saying that's the right call, but I think that's kind of the thought process of went through. If he really wanted to fire Clay Helton, I think he could have, but there's going to be some disadvantages of doing it when you were. One of the things being there's still 4 years left on his contract, and that's a lot of money.
Lau Lau on YouTube says, do you really expect to see Gary Bryant Jr. on the field this year? All 148 pounds of him in pads soaking wet?
Did you see Dominic Davis as a freshman on the field? Because that coaching staff brought him in. They saw him as a playmaker, and they put him on the field.
Yeah.
I think that's what you see with Gary Bryant.
Speed is something that USC
He brings something
needs.
different than the other players. So there's a bunch of good reasons you might see him.
Bank on YouTube says, which coach will be responsible for reducing penalties?
Larry Scott. Does that count?
Coach Scott.
That would, of course, be reducing penalties across the Pac-12. They just throw a ridiculous amount of flags compared to every other conference. That would be one. But again, it's on Clay Helton. He said that was going to be his focus last year. Penalties and turnovers.
Was USC good at those or no?
They did a little bit better with turnovers, but
I think if you combine them, they were still. I think they were 130th in the country. No, I think they really were like 127th or 128th in the country. Like if you combined turnovers and penalties, whatever.
We have multiple questions from on the same topic. People want to know, do you think USC will ever see any more celebrities return to practice like a Will Ferrell or a Snoop Dogg?
Yeah, I think, they're much more open now, so they're bringing people back to practice. We don't know what the fall is going to be like, but yeah, I think there's going to be some opportunities for things like that. I mean, that's not really like a Clay Helton thing. It might be, I'm not saying it's going to, happen tomorrow, but I think that's going to all be on the table again.
Sure. I mean, Will Ferrell has come to multiple games in the past, so it's not like it's something new. He ran out of the tunnel leading the team before. He was at a random Cal game, at Cal. He
2
showed
years
up.
ago. Yeah.
So, but he's a guy that's been around the program. It's not anything new. Now, he's not Matthew McConaughey coming to every big game or anything like that, but yeah, he's been around the program, so I don't see why that would be out of the unexpected.
Augustine on Facebook says, any word on how season ticket sales are going? And I believe someone else on YouTube earlier asked about, I guess there's a deadline on Friday to renew season tickets.
Yeah, we haven't heard. They haven't, that's not stuff like they release. I think it's going to depend. You kind of have to watch and see what it looks like out there. Even when people are canceling, there's opportunists that say, hey, I'm going to get my tickets now because I still want to go. I can get a little better seats, things like that. So there's people that are canceling, but there's people that are kind of taking those spots too. Not all of them, but I think if it's going to depend on how USC plays against Alabama, really, and you're going to see maybe not for season tickets, but for attendance going in there. Are a lot of people going to show up to a New Mexico game if USC gets blown out by Alabama? It's probably going to be pretty dead in that building. So USC has to do their part to bring those fans in.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have to cover the game if they get blown out against Alabama?
Yeah, we all have to.
Oh, okay.
Boo-hoo, shotgun.
You don't have
cover
any-
football. So sad.
I just didn't know if there was a free Saturday, go to the beach or something.
Anyway.
Because that might be what other people are doing. It's
That's
like,
true.
Yeah, USC's playing. They'll beat New Mexico, but do I really want to watch it? Because maybe it's not going to be that fun to watch.
Yeah,
It'll
but
probably be on Pac-12 Network, and like, do I want to go?
it'll be like an 11 a.m. gross game. I'm kind of leaning towards shotgun on this one.
It would be like a Western Michigan where you're like, why is this team still hanging around with them and going into the fourth quarter type of thing?
That would be a statement if USCFootball.com just didn't cover the game. We're like, we're going to skip this one.
I would hate that. I would.
No,
get
I would hate it
FOMO.
too, but it would
I
be fun.
I
Like, it
couldn't
would
do
be, that would like, people would like take notice if you're like, there's
But at the end of the day, no one
like
would
this,
really
like
care.
we did. Yeah, it's true. Like, but we didn't cover like the opening finals or the Army All American. Well, not the Army, the All American Bowl. We've been at these all the time. Big recruiting events like this, big like recruiting gatherings of the all-star players, because USC always has a whole bunch of dudes. And with this class, they didn't have a bunch of dudes, so we didn't send anybody to cover those events. It was like the first time in a while, so we wouldn't do that to a home game. But going to Dallas, like, do we really need to send 4 people out there for that game? I don't know. Like,
Yes.
I don't think I'll just go myself. And
Okay. Interesting. I got to wrap this up. We're
Yeah, we
past
gotta
an
wrap
hour
it
and a
up.
half, so I'm trying to get through all these questions because we have a lot of good questions. Hugh on Facebook says, how many quality wins do you think USC will have between Bama, Notre Dame, and Oregon? Do you think USC wins any?
Like, if you had to put the over under Bama, Bama like neutral site, Oregon on the road, Notre Dame at home, I would probably set the over under at 0.5. Like,
I would take the over. I think they'll get one at least.
I think if you set, it'd be tough to set it at 1, but yeah, I think 0.5 is probably where you'd want to set it, and I would take the over too. I think they'll get a win in those, but they'll
Notre
probably
Dame at the Coliseum is always much easier than Notre Dame on the road.
yeah.
So it kind of flips in that.
But
sense.
Oregon at Coliseum was not pretty. Now it's going to be a
Sure.
different Oregon
That's a good
team, but it's still a really talented Oregon team, and it's going to be in Eugene, so that's going to be tough.
Randy says, how much of the lack of physicality at practice could be attributed to Clancy Pendergast and his time in the NFL?
It's hard to say because you don't know who's designing the actual practice plan there, whether it's Pendergast, it's Helton, it's a collaborative effort. I don't think there was like they were not tackling because he's an NFL guy and they already know how to tackle in the NFL type of thing, because they still do those things in the NFL. They have shorter periods. They don't work with the players as you don't get to work with the players as much in college, which is the biggest difference from college to pro, because you can bring a guy in and say, hey, you can schedule 8 meetings in a row. Let's come in and watch individual film. Hey, the players only have a certain amount of hours that they're allowed to be with the coaches in college, so it's a lot different in that direction.
I will say, Taylor Mays always said that it seemed like USC kind of had an NFL mindset when it came to practice, where like they're treating them like vets who know what's happening already, and college kids should not be treated like that because they're too young to know at this point. So
Fair point from Taylor.
I feel like that's more to do with like yelling at them and being hard on them too.
yes and no. Yeah. We have a question from Racer X, and I think it is directed towards you, Ryan.
Okay.
He says, in retrospect, do you think SC should have hired Herm Edwards?
No.
You were a hater, though. You've changed your mind.
No, I was a hater on the Herm Edwards thing. I think he's doing a pretty good job there. Like they're 7-5. And they're recruiting better. They're taking advantage of some of the, USC's left some food on the table, and Herm Edwards will be able to gobble it up the way they've hired. I think USC being USC with great coaches and great recruiters, they'll be able to hold off Arizona State. But no, USC should not have hired Herm Edwards.
Shotgun, any thoughts on the Herm hype?
I didn't think it was a good decision when they made it. I think he's done much better than expected. But like I said earlier, got to start getting more wins now.
Yeah.
They've done well to make an impact initially. Now, can you take that next step? And that's going to be the big question.
Yeah.
Jeff on Facebook says, of the kids recently offered, who do you think commits from SEC territory or Big Ten country?
Oh, geez.
There's been so many offers that it's really difficult to say.
Yeah, they're
no
just,
offer,
yeah.
And the answer is going to be none of them
For a long time.
unless USC starts winning.
Yeah.
You don't get kids to jump across the country when you're mediocre or you're struggling.
Yeah, don't expect a bunch of those guys to commit in May. This is going to be more late in the process kind of thing. This is getting your foot in now for a lot of those out-of-state guys. But USC has to do it on the field. Otherwise, they'll just kind of fade away as far as those players go.
Mm-hmm.
Those offers will mean nothing at that point.
Yep. Loser said, how did the SC kids fare at the Combine?
Good. Yeah, I mean, Pittman ran 4.52, which is good for a guy his size. Austin Jackson showed athleticism. I think he long jumped like
He
10
was third
feet.
in the broad jump, and I think he was top 10 among linemen in the 40 time as well. So.
Yeah, pretty good vertical leap. So I think I don't think either one of them were going to be like combine warriors, but they did probably a little better than what you expect, and it's going to be more about their film and production. So you just didn't. I think they didn't need bad combine grades, and they didn't. They probably got a little bit better than what you thought. So I think they both helped themselves.
Dean on YouTube says, who do you guys think will be the starting wide receivers?
Amon-Ra St. Brown,
Tyler Vaughns.
Drake London.
And I think it depends on where London is slotted at, whether he's an outside guy, an inside guy. I think otherwise, I'm going to go with Brew McCoy. There's a reason why he was the top rated.
Ooh, some spice.
I got to see him practice. Just the shotguns rule. I want to see him practice
Yeah.
for a week before I put him in the starting lineup.
Good point.
I mean, it could be all four of them
Yeah.
as well.
Sure.
That's why I said it depends on where London lines up.
Tito says, how about Jacob Lichtenstein and Trevor Trout? Have you heard anything about those guys?
Liechtenstein, he missed the entire year with the calf injury. I'll check in on that one, see if we can find something for the war room next week. Trevor Trout's a guy that's been healthy. He's just got to take another step forward and become a guy there. And it's hard to make an impact and make some big impressions when you're behind Brandon Keely and Marlon Tuipulotu and Jay Tufele. But you would like to see this should be the year that he kind of takes a step forward and maybe earns a little bit more playing time than he's gotten so far.
Yeah, if he gets some playing time this year, then by next year he could be penciled in as a starter. So I think that's what you want to see.
And he's got to hold off a guy like Dejon Benton, who had already moved ahead of him last year. So it's time for him to step up, or he's a guy that'll fade away and never be heard of in this program.
Yep. We have multiple questions about USC's defense. One asked us, will USC's defense be a top 20 defense? And another said top 25.
I mean, they're talented enough to be there. I think, we got to see what the schemes kind of look like, but I feel like they've upgraded the defensive staff, and they have a real opportunity to play closer to that level of talent, which is a top 20, 25 defense. So, yeah, I think they can get there.
And to Orlando's credit, everywhere he's been the first year, you see that boost. Whether it's a big enough boost is TBD.
Yeah.
And then, Shotgun, you look like you're about to add something.
Nope.
Okay. And then Lau says, are they going to finally teach the linebackers how to cover, or are they going to keep being burnt toast on the field? Sorry, Lau.
I think they're specifically not going to teach the linebackers how to cover. That's Todd Orlando's thing is linebacker. So, yeah, I think they're going to be coached up pretty well. He's always coached the linebackers everywhere he's been. I think you're going to see the linebackers utilized much better in this defense.
One last question. It's from Coley White. He says, hypothetically, do you think USC could survive as an independent, or will it be a problem?
Do you want? Completely. I think they could. Do something like what Notre Dame does, where you're independent in football. They are a draw. They get the benefit of the doubt all the time. I mean, just look at 2016. This was a team that got blown out by Alabama, was 1-3. And then they beat Washington on the road. And the rest of the schedule was kind of meh. And they get into the Rose Bowl and they win and they beat Penn State. Like USC would get the benefit of the doubt when they're good. So it's more about USC fixing their athletic department, which they're trying to do, getting in the right coach. And a lot of the national media people that were talking about this, like with USC's potential to go independent, Clay Travis, Petros Papadakis, they were all saying this stuff. You get the right coach in there, and USC is going to be very good. It's like you have to try to screw it up. They would have a great opportunity, and I think you could do something like partner with NBC and Notre Dame and USC games on the weekend. So when Notre Dame's on the road, you have a USC home game, and it makes the USC Notre Dame game even better. Something like that could potentially work. Just looking at exploring it. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but I think they have the brand. If you get the right people in there and you fix things in the athletic department, stop having former football players as your athletic directors, I think there's a path that you could do something like that. So it'd be interesting to see, but I think they could potentially pull it off.
I lied. One more question. We had multiple questions, Ryan, wondering if you want to revise your original prediction about Chip Kelly over at UCLA.
What was my original prediction? Yeah, I thought he'd be good, and he's not been. So he's been pretty terrible, actually. And the biggest factor for me is the recruiting. And this is what we thought he would be good, because you take this innovative scheme and you pair it up with high-level recruits, and what kind of results would you get? We looked with Graham Harrell, like, hey, what would Air do with like awesome players? Like, oh, they'd score a whole bunch of points. It'd be great.
Yep.
Chip Kelly's sort of doing it his way, where he's not going and get the best players in Southern California. He's recruiting like the OKGs, our kind of guys or whatever, and that's not really what you want to do at UCLA. Like if you try to do that at USC, like this past class is not USC's DNA. Like USC doesn't take a whole bunch of 3-stars and turn them into like great players 3 years later. They take the best players and they play great, and like that's what you do. And maybe you can develop them, maybe you don't. So what Chip Kelly was doing there is very interesting on the recruiting side. It just doesn't make sense, and scheme-wise, it doesn't make sense. It's like he's getting away from what the cool stuff that he did. He's not. It's like he's trying to do the opposite. Like it's almost like you're a typecast actor and you want to play a different role. And I feel like that's what Chip Kelly's doing, and I think it's been a mistake. I don't know if he's going to get another great opportunity like this at UCLA. He's had multiple NFL opportunities, but to me, it seems like he felt he was typecast, and he was trying to go and prove that he wasn't that cute child actor with the dimples or whatever. And now he's like, I'm the mature guy. I'm Justin Bieber with like a whole bunch of tattoos and some scraggly facial hair, trying to show I'm not like this teen heartthrob anymore. But that's why you were good. Like you were good because of that, and you're trying to get away from it. So yeah, I thought he'd be better. A lot of people thought he'd be better. He has not been. It's been a disaster there.
I never thought that would lead into a Justin Bieber analogy.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Does it work though? Like, isn't that what he did? Like, didn't Bieber like try to show everyone?
Bieber, okay, it was like I'm not gonna get into Bieber's history.
I'm just
but-
curious who's your favorite teen heartthrob turned heavy tattoo guy now.
Yeah.
But you can think about that while I talk about Chip Kelly, because
Okay.
I did not think it was a good hire. I thought that he had stopped innovating in the NFL, and it's kind of what we're seeing.
Yeah.
And so the question was he going to continue?
Was he going to go back
evolve?
to his college stuff? And he hasn't. He's done more NFL stuff.
And was he going to evolve and change? That was the thing. He was very innovative at Oregon, and now people ask him, like, why don't you use some of the stuff you used there? Well, the game changes. The game changes. I would love to run the what was it, the wing tee?
Yeah, it's like the exact opposite. He wants to run like the ancient offense instead of like the newfangled offense.
Yeah, he doesn't want to innovate anymore. It seems like to me he wants to. In the NFL stuff, it doesn't seem like he's been adding a bunch of stuff. Now, in games, occasionally he's done really well. USC last year, he had some good schemes in there and did some nice things that enabled them to be able to run the ball so well. But then you look at other games, and it's just like, why are you not trying something else? It just seems like he kind of rests on his laurels at times.
Yeah.
And the recruiting is obviously has not gone well for them, but also you have to note how many players have left the program.
Yeah.
It's been a revolving door there. It's crazy.
You can not
that
recruit
first
as well
year, like
initially,
you can like clear some stuff out, but it's like every year you're clearing people out.
and you can not recruit as well initially, and they're really slow in the process. They want to get to know everybody, and hey, you come in from the NFL, so you don't know everyone initially, so you can slow play it. That's fine. But when you clear out so many players and then you don't recruit well, now your roster is just not up to par with everyone else, and that's what's happened to UCLA, I think.
He does have a 500 record against USC, so I mean at UCLA, he had a way better record if you include Oregon. But yeah,
I mean, a lot of people have a 500 record, at least a 500 record against USC recently.
I can always tell when a snarky comment is coming from Ryan. He makes a certain face. I was bracing myself. It wasn't too bad, though.
okay.
Alrighty, I think it is time to wrap it up. We're almost at the 2-hour mark. Some housekeeping things before we sign off. Mr. Abraham, when is our next show?
Shouldn't we
And
discuss these things beforehand, Miss Producer Lady?
Mr. Boss, man. Yes, we should. What do you want the schedule to be going forward? Or should
I
we update the people later?
kind of feel like Sundays are better because we're gonna have Saturday practice, and it might be a good way to wrap up each week than Wednesdays during the week. So because we can't do Thursdays because we're gonna have Thursday practice. So are you cool Sundays, or is it?
Welcome to the USCFootball.com meeting
most of
that
the time.
you're watching right now.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
That's probably. I think might go to Sundays
Okay.
for the spring.
Continue to okay.
Yeah.
Sounds Gucci. Okay, that's gonna wrap it up. Any final thoughts before we do, gentlemen?
I would like to apologize to Ryan Abraham because there are 130 teams ranked, and USC was 130th
Yeah, I was
in
wondering
kickoff
about that,
returns.
but I didn't want to contradict you.
But a lot of the things are not up to 130. So I feel like there was a team added last year. So
I said Akron twice. No, I don't know. Like that's
I feel like
I
there was a
was-
team that
It's-
moved up because it was 129 before.
it
I
was terrible. Like
it was the worst though.
The point is, it was awful, and that's why you can get a lot better with a good special team.
And I bet why you're saying Akron is because Akron actually led the nation in kickoff return defense. So that's probably why you're mentioning them, because it's side by side on the chart.
I don't know what Akron is in my brain, because when USC went on the road and lost to BYU, BYU went on the road and lost to Akron the next week. So I
thought it
think
was Toledo.
was it? No, I think
Toledo.
was it Toledo?
Yep.
Oh,
So that wasn't why.
It's
Maybe
not-
it's because Akron brought back their baseball program. Good on you, Akron. They have a baseball program again. So does Boise
it
State.
definitely was not that.
Boise State got a sweep this weekend. First time they've had a baseball team in 40 years. Their first home games, and they won all 4 of them. Congratulations.
Hey, real quick thing,
Yes.
and stuff. So Carol Fold announces that free tuition for incoming USC freshmen that their families make under $80,000 a year. Stanford, I think it's a big advantage because I think it's under $100,000 a year. Their endowment will pay for the
150,000.
Wow, so it's a big one. But for baseball, it's a program that has a sport that has like 11.7 scholarships or whatever it is. Is that right?
Yep.
Bam, got it. That should help with their, because the partial scholarships. If you're going to get a full scholarship because your family doesn't make a lot of money, it helps the baseball team.
Yes, definitely could help. That's one of the advantages to schools. Georgia example, they have the Hope Scholarship, which is a lottery-based scholarship. If you go to a public school, you get free tuition as long as you hold a certain GPA. If you can get into USC, now that'll be the hard thing for some people, but
Yeah,
if
it's
you can
still
get
hard.
in, then you could potentially be on academic scholarship, and then therefore you are free to the baseball program, and then that's it. That can be a big boost. But $80,000 in Southern California, that's going to be tough for a lot of kids to fall under, I would think, just because the inflated cost of living out here. But it could definitely add a player or two to the roster. So eventually, because I don't think that's going into effect for 2 years, I want to say. I'd have to reread the
know.
article, but I think it's going to be a little bit, but could eventually be a boost to the baseball program as well.
I know we get asked this a lot, and we've answered it a lot, but Judy has asked 2 weeks in a row. Ryan, can you display which signatures are on the helmet?
Oh, yeah, there's a bunch of them. Some of them are hard to read.
I just felt bad. She wanted to know 2 weeks
This
in a row.
one.
Shotgun.
So there's
Anthony Munoz,
Juju. C.R. Roberts was like the linebacker in the 1950s that played against Texas that I think helped it, like you with Sam Bam Cunningham. Sam's on here too. He's right here. But he helped integrate in Texas. So he was one of I think the first African American player there. Chris Hale is on there.
Clay Helton.
Clay Helton's on there too. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a bunch of them on there.
There you go.
Oh, Anthony Munoz.
Yes, shotgun.
Hall of Fame.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap it up. We're almost at the 2 hour mark. Thanks everybody for watching. And if you're watching this or listening to it on podcast, thanks for listening. We appreciate it. But that's going to wrap it up. That's Ryan. That's Shotgun. I'm Keely. We'll see y'all next Sunday. Bye.
Bye-bye.
And Anthony Munoz, former baseball player too.
Oh.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, and he had the old school bats that were titanium metal that shot rockets off of them. Can you imagine if you're a pitcher and you see a guy coming up looking like
No.
Anthony Munoz?
No, thank you.
Boom.
No, just put four. He can go to first base.
Yeah, that's true. Alrighty. I said bye, Shotgun. You know the rules. No more talking. Alrighty. Goodbye.